Hello, and welcome to How to Create Successful Community and Stakeholder Engagement. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for making the commitment to improve your skills in this area. Now, my name is Susan Carter, and I will be your trainer today. Thank you again so much for joining me. Now, perhaps you've been able to take the time to take a look at my company website, the Community Studio. The link for it is just down in the corner there, so please do check me out if you get a little bit of time later. Perhaps you've also had a look at my LinkedIn profile to see what my background is, what the background of your trainer today is going to be. If you haven't had a chance yet, I just wanted to start by giving a little background about me and why you should listen to me on this topic at all. And my background will let you know that I've been a community and stakeholder engagement practitioner for over 15 years now. And I'm really good at this stuff. It's an area that fascinates me, and it's an area that I've moved into really over the course of my career. And that's pretty common for most community and stakeholder engagement people. There's no community and stakeholder engagement courses at university or anything like that. It is an area that you tend to pick up through the course of your career. So most community and stakeholder engagement specialists actually come from quite different areas, quite divergent fields and backgrounds. And my background is environmental science. I started my career as an environmental scientist. And it started to change when I started to take part in science communication, and I really loved that, and it's definitely where my career started to change. I loved science communication, particularly the connecting people to the environment, and then made a pretty natural progression into behaviour change programs, and that connected to fantastic things for me. One is the love of the environment and connecting people to the environment, and also the study of people and their behaviour and how and why they respond to things and how and why they don't. And it really started to connect those two areas for me. And then I moved into community and stakeholder engagement, which was also a pretty natural progression once you've got a really good understanding of, the technical side, as I did through science and developing a lot of science programs. And then that background around people and their behaviour and how and why they respond to things. Moving into community and stakeholder engagement was really quite a natural progression from there. And that's been my career now for the last 15 years, working on community and stakeholder engagement programs, doing all the planning around those, developing up the process and leading them through. And I've also been a leader in organisations over the past many years, and so have been able to develop the capability of not only a team of community and stakeholder engagement professionals, but also the teams of engineers and scientists that I tend to work with. And that's really where I am focused now, is helping others develop their capability in this area. It is most definitely an emerging field, so that's why I thank you for taking your time to invest in your skills today. It is an emerging field, and it seems to me that more and more it is people who are not community and stakeholder engagement specialists. It's engineers, it's project managers, it's planners, and it's policy professionals who are expected to do community and stakeholder engagement tasks as a part of their role. And if we can work on that together and help develop each other's skills, then it will help those processes work better and help your projects work better, and help you get noticed at work when you're able to come out with the lingo around community and stakeholder engagement and give great examples about what you've done. You'll be able to take those fantastic steps in your career. But let's get going with the content today. As I said, feel free to jump onto my website, thecommunitystudio.com, or take a look at my LinkedIn profile. There's a link from my website straight into my LinkedIn profile, so you can take a look there. And I also have a Facebook page for the Community Studio, so feel free to have a look there and like the page, and you'll start to get updates about the fantastic things that are going on in terms of community and stakeholder engagement projects around the world. And I write a blog, and it goes on there in weekly as well. But let's get going. And once again, it's going to do this. Here we are. We've arrived at the next page. How exciting. Just to increase your viewing experience today, it's much better. The presentation, the webinar will operate a lot more efficiently if you have things turned off in the background. It will stop any buffering or anything like that. And please just silence your phone, close the door, and give yourself some time to learn some new skills and pick up some new strategies about this emerging area. Now stay tuned, because at the end of the presentation I do have a bonus offer for you around engagement planning, an engagement planning template. And engagement planning is something you'll hear me talk a lot about today. It is one of the keys to really delivering successful community and stakeholder engagement practice. If you've been involved in not so great community and stakeholder engagement experiences in the past, it is likely that that was due to a lack of planning. So stay tuned for that one. Now, first up, I just want us to go through a series of questions just to get you in the mindset of, well, what have you done in the past around community and stakeholder engagement? What do you have experience in? So what I'd just like to take a few moments. I've got 3 questions and I'd just like to go through them, and we will come back to these throughout the presentation. So first up, what I'd like you to think about, and please write down your answers for this if you've got a pen and paper handy. Please just tell me, what community and stakeholder engagement tools have you used in the past? Or what are you using right now? What have you used in the past? What tools? Let's give you a couple of moments to write that down. I can give you some thinking music. La 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 la, which I think is the Smurfs tune. Might be all I have. Okay, next question. I'd also like you just to note down exactly who are your community and stakeholders. Who are they? No clues from me. Who are they? La 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 la. All I've got is the Smurfs tune. Okay, and this is a big question, so it gets a big question mark. Can you let me know, what planning have you done for engagement in the past? I've already alluded to that I feel engagement planning is pretty important. Now, what have you done in the past? Have you worked out who your stakeholders are? Have you planned what tools and activities to use? And have you worked out what your purpose or your outcome is when you are doing community and stakeholder engagement? So they're yes, no answers. So just note those down. So the reason I have this question, and the reason why it's got a big question mark, is that these 3 things are really the guts of it. These are what you need to have worked out before you start community and stakeholder engagement, before you start any process. You really need to know who your stakeholders are, who you're going to be working with, who's important. And you need to know what tools and activities you are going to use, and you need to know where you're going. So knowing who your stakeholders are, knowing what the outcome is, what tools and activities to get there. Okay. Now, you are in the right place today. You are in the right place if you are in the plan, particularly in the planning phases of a project that will require community and stakeholder engagement. You're in the right place. You're also in the right place if you're a planner, an engineer, or a policy professional, and you know that you need to incorporate community and stakeholder engagement into your projects, particularly if sometimes you just need to say, even just to get projects approved, what community and stakeholder engagement have you done is possibly a question that you're being asked these days. Now, you're in the right spot if you just know community and stakeholder engagement is an expected skill set these days. If you're having trouble going to interviews and you don't have those experiences around community and stakeholder engagement, you don't have the lingo, it can be harder and harder now to move into different roles, and particularly move up in an organisation if you can't prove that community and stakeholder engagement and relationship building is something that you have experience in. You know you need to improve your skills, and you know you need to improve the skills of your team too, if you have them. You might even just want to make sure you're in the right place today if you just want to make sure if you're getting the right advice from an internal or external specialist as well. And you're in the right spot today if you're from a communication, PR, and marketing background, and you're expected to be that community and stakeholder engagement expert as well. Now back to those questions. Now you are in the right spot today if you answered the question, what tools have you used, with any of these that are listed here. And you're also in the right spot if you answered the question, who are your community and stakeholders, with the community or everyone or the government. I need you to know that these are really enormous groups of people, and we can't do fantastic community and stakeholder engagement if we are not targeted, if we are not working directly with the people that we know are both impacted and have influence on our projects. Working with everyone, that's too hard, and it's also just not necessary either. You're also in the right spot if you answered no to all those questions around planning. As I said, planning is the key to delivering really fantastic engagement processes that will support and get your projects delivered and approved. Now today we are going to talk about one model that will help you identify how to engage with different stakeholders and the different tools to use. Now this is one model which works for all stakeholders, including your internal and your corporate stakeholders. It works to help you map out who they all are and what sort of work you need to do with all of them as well. We'll look at a good and not so good engagement process, so you can start to move to having those great engagement processes as part of your projects. And we'll also talk about planning, of course, and we particularly will talk about the 8-step planning system that will help you optimize your ability to produce proactive, innovative, and successful engagement processes for your projects and get them approved. But before we talk about those things, let's just go back to, well, what is community and stakeholder engagement anyway? And let's just make sure we're on the same page about that. So engagement is an umbrella. It is an umbrella term for just a huge array of tools and activities. Really, if you can work with people on it, it is engagement, and it is really only limited to your creativity and your innovation in terms of the work that you can do in engagement, the things that fall into there. Now, engagement is all about developing process. It is a highly process-driven area. It is about developing process to work with people, to create solutions and make decisions. The making decisions is a crucial element of engagement. If you are not making a decision, if what you are doing with people is not leading to decision making, it's not engagement. That decision making element is really, really important. Engagement is also about your interactions and your relationship building with people though. So the elements around your interactions, your decision making with people, and your relationship building is all part of engagement. Now here's this model which is a single model which will help you plan your approach for all of your stakeholders, including those internal and corporate stakeholders that you probably have. Now this is a model known as the spectrum of public participation, and it was developed by an organisation known the International Association of Public Participation, or IAP2. And IAP2 is the professional association of this area. So it's called the spectrum of public participation, or just the engagement spectrum as it tends to be more lovingly known. And what this model sets out is that although engagement is an umbrella term for a huge array of tools and activities. All of those tools and activities fall into 5 different levels of engagement. They all fall neatly into these 5 levels of engagement. So you can start to be more planned and targeted around what your activities are and know that they fall into one particular type of engagement. So these are the 5 levels, as you can see: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. And the diagrams give a little bit of a hint around the type of interaction that is expected at each of those levels. Now, in those diagrams, the big circle is essentially the organisation or the project, and the smaller circle are the stakeholders. The smaller circles are the stakeholders. So you can see the difference there with inform. It is the organisation or project delivering one-way information out to their stakeholders. It's very much communication. Inform is communication. And then you go up to empower, where there is no big circle. The big circle is sitting with the smaller circles in that diagram, and in empower, decision making is shared. It is a shared decision making area, empower. So let's take a little bit more of a look at this model. Now, this model is read from left to right, with the level of engagement for stakeholders increasing as you move from left to right. You can imagine that information going one way out to stakeholders, that's a fairly passive form of engagement there. Up to empower, where there is shared decisions with stakeholders, it's a lot more active, and the decisions tend to be a lot more enduring, and the relationships more enduring as well. Now, inform and consult, as I said, are more passive. They are passive forms of engagement. You can see there, inform is information going one way out, and consult is information coming one way back from stakeholders to you. So a survey is a perfect example of a consult tool. It is a one-way in. And the involve, collaborate, and empower are far more active. This is where you start to get real dialogue between the parties. Now, relationships and solutions, as I said, are more enduring as you move from left to right. It's far more powerful. Any empower process which is used appropriately is very, very powerful and tends to be very enduring, with very long-term relationships created. Transformative, you would certainly call it. Now, large-scale projects should have actions across all 5 levels of engagement, with different stakeholders involved in different elements. And this, or who is involved in what element, is very much dependent on stakeholder analysis and deciding the impact on stakeholders and what their influences are, and therefore what their needs are. Inform is perfectly okay. You often see when people are introduced to this model, they want to immediately head to the right of the spectrum, but inform is perfectly okay. And in fact, most of your stakeholders, the bulk of your stakeholders, will probably be in that inform category, because they just want the information, they just want to know what's going on, and they want that in a timely manner. But what is not okay is putting stakeholders in an inform and just feeding information out to them if they actually want and need to be further up that spectrum and working in a far more dynamic situation with you in terms of the engagement. That's where you'll find you'll get into trouble if you're only using inform and consult tools, but you actually have stakeholders that need to be further up that model. Now, smaller projects can certainly get away with about 2 or 3. You'll often find that, and that's perfectly okay. But you should never just have one. I've never seen a project where just inform is okay. For example, there's always stakeholders, a diminishing number of stakeholders up the spectrum there, but there are always stakeholders who need to be up that empower, collaborate. And again, it's your stakeholder analysis that will help you work that out. Now, engagement processes, let's take a look at these. Now, this is possibly something you haven't thought of before, that engagement is actually a process. I know a lot of people, when I first start to talk to them about community and stakeholder engagement, they tend to think it's something, you just do and you just see what's happening on the day and you just put this out or you do this, and don't tend to think about engagement as a process so much. But it definitely is. One of the biggest indicators around your success is having the right processes in place, putting those processes in place and then trusting in those processes and working through them. So let's have a look first at a common, but possibly not so great process that you see a lot. And it is this. It is where community engagement is an afterthought. Now, this sort of process is where your project has gone along as it usually would. You've scoped out the issues, you've gathered all that data, you've looked at the data, you've defined that problem, you've gone out and investigated those options, and you've decided where you're going to go. You've made the decision. Now, just have a think at the moment with this situation, because we talked a little bit about what community and stakeholder engagement is when we started, and we talked about that making a decision with people was one of the key indicators of whether you were doing engagement or not. So, in this situation, are you doing engagement if you just go out to the public when the decision has been made? What you will be doing in this case is informing people. You will be going out with comms, and you'll probably also be educating them around, trying to educate them around your decision and the genius of it. That may or may not work. Sometimes this will be fine because nobody is particularly impacted by it, or you've hit the nail right on the head and made the perfect decision that everybody thinks is fantastic. But what you'll likely find is that in this situation, you'll start to get feedback back about, well, nobody asked me, and have you thought about this and this as well? And how are you going to implement this? This is not implementable. And have you thought about this, this, and this down the track? You'll start to get this sort of situation. You might even get frustration and anger if the decision you've made has a really, really big impact on people and they've had no say in it. It's just come at them. You're likely to get really a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And you'll often see when that happens, projects pretty much have to go back to the beginning in this sort of situation when they've done this. So let's have a look at a better process. So this is a little bit off center, but this is a more robust engagement process. This is what I'd like to encourage you to start to include in your project processes. So you can see that the project is going along as you would expect it to, with the issue scoped and data gathered and the problem defined and all those options investigated and evaluated. But instead of community engagement coming at the end, it is coming at each stage of your project delivery. Now, you may be looking at this and thinking, my God, if I do all of that, I am never going to get anything done. But it's just not the case, because what you'll find in this situation is that you need to do a lot of work in community engagement, especially if your decision does have a really big impact on people and you need to go out and do a lot of work with them at this stage. But the difference is that in this process, all of that work you do with your community will be probably pretty defensive and a pretty angry environment, and you will be reacting all the time and trying to chase your tail and get this thing right. Might even find yourself fired from the project if you cause a really terrible situation there. But this will be a lot of work, and it will not be fun. It will not be fun because you will be dealing with a lot of stakeholder anger is the possibility there, as opposed to this. Probably the same amount of work, but if you are working with people in that issue scoping, problem defining and evaluation of those problems, then you are working in a very different environment where you are imagining a future together, and you are working on that future together, and you're bringing all those different perspectives in, and you're working on that together. It will be different. It'll be far more fun. It'll be far more engaging, and you will probably find really innovative solutions to your problems there and to your project. So this is what I would like to encourage you to be starting to develop in your projects, is thinking about engagement from the earliest stage possible. From when you first hear about the project and first put onto it, thinking about, well, who are our stakeholders in that, and how can we involve them, and how can we imagine this project and define the problems and make the decision together. Now let's move on to planning, which is one of my favorite things in the world. I am a big planning nerd and I love it. So planning in a project, I'm sure you know, is very important. And if you are planning to work with people in your project, then planning is really, really important on a number of levels, and we'll work through a few of those now. Now, engagement planning is an 8-step process, and that 8-step process is repeatable and it is scalable. So it's essentially the same steps every single time, whether you are working on a really, really big project or a small one. It is the same 8 steps. Now, as you get better at it, like everything, it gets easier and it becomes more automatic, and you can spend time in the different stages of that step process that you will start to recognize are going to be more important for different projects. In some projects, some of those steps will be more important than others. And as you get better at it, you'll be better at recognizing which ones are which. So let's take a look at a few of those steps. So first up is identifying your vision and your purpose. Now, this is one of the questions I asked you at the beginning, of course. So identifying your purpose is essentially identifying, well, what's your goalposts? Where are you heading for here? You'll hear about purposeful is a word in engagement that has a lot of meaning. It's all about knowing where you're going, putting the right tools in place and getting yourself there, and making it meaningful for your stakeholders who are involved. So it's very important to identify what that is when you're first planning your engagement. Now, identifying and analysing your stakeholders. It is not possible to do great engagement without knowing who your stakeholders are, without being targeted, without knowing where they're at and what their wants and needs are around this project and how is best to work with them or talk to them. You need to know all of those things before you start engaging. You also need to map out your stakeholders across those 5 levels of engagement, as I said earlier, and that will dictate what tools and what your promise is to each of those stakeholders. Now, this is where you start implementation planning, knowing what level of engagement you're working with everybody on and starting to map out what those tools are. All sounds pretty logical at this stage, I'm sure. Here's a few more of those steps. Now, identifying your risks and creating a risk management plan is probably something that you do as part of normal project planning. And I would also like to encourage you to start thinking about people risks. What are your engagement risks when you're doing that project planning as well? I guess one of the key risks you find in engagement planning is if you're dealing with any frustration, particularly any historical frustration that you need to move past before you can get going, or if you're dealing with any difficult people or difficult situations, and having a plan to deal with that is important before you start. And identifying your governance arrangements, especially if you're working in collaborate and empower, governance arrangements are very important to know about. if you have stakeholder groups or working groups or anything like that as part of your engagement plan, knowing exactly what their role is going to be and what their decision-making power is going to be is important. And developing an evaluation plan. This should really be monitoring an evaluation plan, but this is knowing what you're looking for, what the signs of success are, and what the successes are. So you can make any changes along the way if things aren't quite panning out as you expected. So you can make any changes along the way, and also so you'll be able to write up around, well, this was really successful and this doesn't work quite as well, and next time we'll do blah, blah, and blah. And so you can do that continuous learning around your engagement processes in your projects. Now you're here today, so I think you know that it's your time to develop up your community and stakeholder engagement skills. And I know it is, because it is more and more expected that people are able to have these community and stakeholder engagement skills as part of their current roles and projects. You see it more and more. And I know most projects these days cannot get approved, or you need to put in your project plan what your community engagement is. So you need to know how to plan that out and how to make it purposeful, so you're not wasting your time there and you're getting great input into your projects, and you're not accidentally causing any risks due to poorly planned engagement. So it is your time to pick up these skills and advance your career. I know it's your time to be able to wow your colleagues and bosses with your knowledge of this stuff, and how you have just jumped straight into it to up your skills in this area. And I know that you need to be able to check that the strategies and planning that might be in place now for your projects, that you can check that that's all right and feel confident about. And look, it is definitely your time to stop being reactive around this stuff. If you are in a guinea pig wheel of dealing with your stakeholders in this very reactive, possibly really defensive way, it is your time to stop and increase your skills, do the planning around that, so you can move through it into a much more productive and planned place with your stakeholders. It is your time. Now, I want you to remember that nothing we have shared today is theory. I've used every single one of these strategies in my career as a community and stakeholder engagement practitioner. And I can tell you with 100% confidence that these are the things you need to get right to be able to create successful engagement, to be able to move through those very defensive and just not fun situations that you might be in with your stakeholders, and move them into a really productive, and sometimes just a really productive and really friendly. It can turn out to be actually a really friendly environment if you change your approach to your stakeholders. And I have seen that happen. I have put in place processes that have calmed angry people down and had them working with me instead of, against the organisation. Now, I want you to remember too that community and stakeholder engagement, it is scalable and repeatable. So the basics that you learn as part of community and stakeholder engagement, you just get to build on them. It's nothing that changes. The engagement planning, that system, is the same every single time. It is repeatable and scalable. Doesn't matter what sort of project. That process is the same all the time, and it is a system that works. So I'm wondering, do you want to learn how to improve your community and stakeholder engagement know-how and what actions to put in place? Do you want to learn that? And do you want to improve your engagement planning so you can be confident of successful outcomes rather than that black hole of reactive and time-consuming tasks that I know some projects can suddenly find themselves in? So what I'd like to talk to you about is Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement, which is pretty much Engagement 101. So as part of this course, part of this e-learning course, we'll go through all those basics of engagement to get those ground level skills, to get all that groundwork in place for you. Now, Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement is a fully online learning experience and will work on all of your devices as well. You'll be able to learn the basics anywhere, and as a bonus, there's no butcher's paper, there's no strangers, and no sticky notes. There's no need to take yourself away from the office for a day or two to get this training. You'll be able to take it. You could do it in whole of one day if that's what you choose to do, or over a series of hour sessions over a few weeks if that works for you better. You'll be able to pick that up. Now, after working through Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement, you'll be able to identify who those audiences and who your stakeholders are. So be able to start to target down on just exactly who your community and stakeholders are and who you need to work on, who you need to work with, and how you need to work with them. You'll be able to run a stakeholder analysis session with a team. And again, that is a process. That is a skill that is repeatable and scalable. Being able to run a stakeholder analysis session is something you could do with a few people for a small project, or it is something you can do with a room full of people for a really very big project to get a sense of who's out there and who you need to be working with. And in fact, who in your team or who is working with people now, and to get a sense of, well, is there any double ups in that? Is there two of my team working with the same people? And is there potentially a really important stakeholder that we're just missing? That will help you uncover all of that. You'll also be able to confidently talk about those 5 levels of engagement and the different tools at each level which may work for your project. One of the things that we do as part of Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement is actually work through some of I guess the most common, the most popular of those tools in each of those levels, and just talk about how they might fit into a project at any given time. Now, you'll also be able to identify the skills you need to be great at engagement, and you'll also be able to develop up a plan to develop those skills for yourself, and that's something you'll be able to work with on a team as well if you have them. And of course, you'll be able to wow all your colleagues and bosses in meetings. And start to plan and develop stakeholder engagement processes that will deliver more innovation to your work and get you noticed. You'll be able to wow your colleagues and bosses and get you noticed, and that next promotion might be just around the corner. So this is what is in the course. Now, Module 1, we take a closer look at what is community and stakeholder engagement, and we will work through that question so you have a very clear understanding of what it is and what it isn't. We'll look at that engagement model more, and as I said, look at some tools, some of the key tools, and how you may or may not apply those to a project. We'll look at engagement mindset. Now, being genuine and being purposeful, as I said, is crucial to engagement success. Now, this engagement mindset is all about testing, well, why are you doing engagement and what is your mindset when you approach stakeholders at the moment? And it gives you a really great tool for just how you flip that around and make it a positive mindset with stakeholders, and they will pick up on that. Stakeholders certainly pick up quite quickly if your approach to them is not genuine, if your engagement is token, they will pick that up. So this module will help you be more purposeful and more genuine in your engagement. And we'll start to define your audiences and look at who they are. Do you have government audiences? Do you have geographic community audiences? Do you have industry-based audiences? We'll start to define those, help you be more targeted. Next module is all around engagement processes, so we'll look at those a little bit more closely. And then there is, of course, the 8-step planning system. We will, of course, work through an overview of that, and the area of that system that we will spend the most time in is stakeholder analysis, because that is the step where you can be really very effective very quickly. In fact, if you do nothing else, just having a great understanding of exactly who your stakeholders are will make you far more effective. If you do absolutely nothing else, that will help you. So that is why we will spend most time in that section, so you have a really good understanding of how to run that stakeholder analysis. Now, developing your engagement skills too. So this section goes through the 5 skill sets that are really very important to be a good engager, and will help you map out a skills development plan so you can up your skills in those areas, and also be able to take your team through that, as I've said, if you have one. So here is what you get. You'll get that engagement plan template. If you sign up now, that engagement plan template will be available for you in the training, in the engagement planning module of the training. Everything will be available for you now, when you can choose to take it all at one time or over a period of time. It is 100% online. There are 30 plus training videos in there across the modules, and there are 20 plus worksheets, resources and templates for you to fill in or download and use as reference for you across your career. Now, here is what you will create with all of those resources. You'll be able to develop that engagement skills development plan and improve your skills. You'll be able to run a stakeholder analysis and be more effective straight away, and get a really good understanding of who's working with who's got the relationships in your current team or your current projects, and who is missing out on that. What stakeholders are you just ignoring completely and possibly are important, and you need to fix that. You'll be able to do that straight away. You'll be able to do a current state analysis of the tools that you're using in your project or your organization now, so to see how they fit across those 5 levels of engagement. You'll also be able to do a current state analysis of any engagement policy or framework that you have in your organization, so you'll get a good sense of what is expected of you in terms of engagement. You'll also get a new skill set. A skill set that can just be incorporated into your current role and projects. It's not the aim of this training to create a new community and stakeholder engagement specialist, although if you want to develop in that way in the future, this will certainly help you. This is to help you incorporate these skills into your current role and projects, so you can be more effective, and so you can get noticed, and so you can increase your skills in this area. That is what this training package is designed to do. Now, here's this engagement plan template. If you're able to sign up now, this will be waiting for you in your training package. And there is also a Community Studio Facebook page for you to join. And so the link to that is in the Community Studio website. There's a link to the Facebook page there, and that is where the blog comes out, and some great tools and things get posted on there to help you keep up with other people in the community and what is happening in terms of community and stakeholder engagement, and get some good ideas for what might be included in your next project. So the investment today is $347 for all of those resources and all of those training videos and everything that it will give you in terms of your career and your skill set. And we do have a 60-day money-back guarantee as well, but there is a caveat on that, and the reason for that is I do just want to attract the people who are ready to take on this challenge around their skills and community and stakeholder engagement. So what I do ask is that you do all the work as a part of the course, or at least a majority of it. You can show me those results, and we can jump on a call and have a bit of a feedback session around what the issues or problems are. And once we've done that, it doesn't matter what you say in terms of that course, in terms of that feedback call, I'll be happy to give you a refund from there. But I do want to attract the people who are ready to do the work and ready to up their skills. So I do have that caveat on the 60-day money-back guarantee, but it will be there for you if we jump on that call. No matter what your feedback is, I'll give you your money back from there. And again, your investment today is $347. Now, I don't think I said before that's Australian dollars, by the way. 347 Australian dollars.
Okay, well, let's just go through some FAQs. And the first one I just wanted to touch on is something I get a bit around just who is community and who is stakeholder, the difference between those two words. And I can tell you that those two words are used interchangeably, which can, of course, be confusing. Now, a stakeholder is part of a community, and a community is definitely your stakeholder. So they are essentially the same thing. The reason I'm in the habit of using both of those words is just so people know that I am referring to all groups. When people tend to say community, they generally mean what is known of a community of place, or that is a community that is part of a geographic location or share something in common like that. So they are impacted by a project because of the geographic position that they are in, for example. And a stakeholder, when people say stakeholder, they generally mean more around their corporate stakeholders, their political stakeholders, media stakeholders, that sort of thing. There are several groups, there are several categories of community, I should say, and we'll go through all of those in Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement, the difference between those categories of community. A community of place is one. But all stakeholders fit into the other categories of community as well. So essentially those two words mean the same thing. But they, as I say, they are used interchangeably, and that can be very confusing. So I say both so people know that I'm referring to everything there. Sometimes I will just say community, and sometimes I will just say stakeholder. I am still just referring to everybody out there, all stakeholders. So another question that comes through quite a lot is just around, well, I've got a comms plan, I've got a media plan, and surely that is enough. And the answer to that is no, it's not. A comms plan, as we have seen, and a media plan too, if you are working in that space, as we've seen from that model of engagement, if you are working in that space, you are working in Inform. You are working in one level of engagement, and it is a level of engagement that is important, but it is passive, and it is not opening up dialogue, and it is a one-way traffic of information flow out to community and stakeholders if you're working in that space. Might be okay if nobody out there in your stakeholder groups needs to be worked on in a much more active way, but that is incredibly unlikely. What is likely happening if you are working with them in that media and comm space is that they're probably just getting frustrated. And if you are just in the guinea pig wheel of trying to push out more and more information and hoping that that will satisfy them, that is a sign that you need to come back and do more engagement planning and be more strategic about how you are working with your stakeholders. Stakeholder planning is a strategic exercise, and it needs to do that whole look at all stakeholders and the whole gamut of ways to look at them. And then you need to come back and say, well, this is the group that we are informing, and so we need a communication plan to be able to do that in a really timely, a really genuine way. Another one that we get a lot is around, well, how long will it take me to work through an introduction to community and stakeholder engagement? And I can tell you that all the training videos add up to, it's just over about an hour and a half of video in there. probably just a smidge under an hour and a half of training video in there. So it is something you could definitely do within a day, go through them all. But there is a series of activities and there are a series of worksheets that are a part of the course. And to get the benefit out of the course, you will need to do them. And some of them will take some time for you to do that reflection and do the work and go back and come back again to the training videos and do the next bit. So I would recommend to put aside, maybe a few hours over a course of about a month and to go through all the work over that sort of period of time, and that will be more than enough for you to do. Okay, and another one we get is around hiring a comms and stakeholder engagement resource. I mean, I get two in here, and one is about, I've got a comms and stakeholder engagement resource on my project, and therefore isn't that enough? And maybe not is the answer to that. It is really difficult for a one person in a project to have all of the interaction and to be doing all the work with communities and stakeholders that you are working with. It is far more likely that you will need people from across your project developing those relationships and delivering those tools. It'll probably be your comms and stakeholder engagement person. Well, hopefully you've just got a stakeholder engagement person. It'll be that person doing that strategic planning around this area, working on the capability of your team, and then helping them deliver out those tools to everybody. That is what I'd like to see a stakeholder engagement person in projects doing, rather than all of the doing around engagement. It is just not possible for one person to be working with everyone and delivering all those tools out. So you would certainly want that person probably delivering the bulk of anything you've got in the collaborate and empower end, doing all the strategic planning around those tools, developing up the capability of your people, and that is what you want the specialist resource doing within your project. And we also get a lot of questions around, well, I'm looking for a stakeholder engagement specialist, and what sort of skills should I be looking for? What sort of people? And what you see more and more these days is communication people getting hired into stakeholder engagement roles. You often will see a role lumped together as communication and stakeholder engagement, and some people can do both. Absolutely, they can do both. I will happily put my hand up and say communication is not a particular skill that I have. I am very much in that strategic engagement space. What you are looking for if you want an engagement person is someone with the skill sets that we will go through in terms of introduction to community and stakeholder engagement. You want to be finding someone with those skill sets, those 5 key skill sets. 5 key skill sets. See, communication is not one of my key skills. You want to find someone with those 5 key skill sets that we will go through as part of introduction to community and stakeholder engagement. If you find that person, you'll find someone with great engagement skills, but definitely everybody can start to increase their skills around those areas and increase their skills with people. Often get asked questions about customer service and how that fits in to community and stakeholder engagement. And I always view customer service as very much the foundation of engagement. I mean, it is really hard to get people working with us in a really proactive way and get people helping us with decisions in a really proactive way if they can't get their phone calls answered and they can't get their questions answered, and if they're coming in to talk to the team and they're not getting a positive experience from talking to people, and if they're not getting services delivered to them, it will be really hard to get them to work with you in a very helpful and a very proactive way. So customer service is definitely the foundation of this area, and if you find that you have poor customer service, you would be well advised to work on that as a skill area for your team too, because you won't get into the fantastic friendly environment, proactive environment, and innovative environment with stakeholders if you're not delivering those base services. It's all part of that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People need their basic needs met first, and then they're happy to come along on a journey. And in this field, customer service is definitely what that base need is, and you need to get that right. Well, we've got a few more minutes left. I promised you under an hour for this webinar, and I am determined to deliver that, but we do have a few minutes left. And one of the things that I just wanted to show you is what your training package looks like on the inside. So we'll just go and have a look at it. This is Engagement 101 here. This is what you are buying today. This is the Engagement 101 course, Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement. This is the basics. Now, if you go in and have a look, Engagement U is the name of my online school at the moment, and this is what it looks like. And this is what the curriculum is. So we have this area of introduction, and I'll talk a little bit more about that terminology and just make sure that we're all on the same page about who is who in what and what is what about all the terminology in the space. And we go more into, well, what is community and stakeholder engagement, and make sure that is clear. And there you can see we talk about, well, who is community, and that's around those categories of community that I was talking to you about. We look quite a lot at community engagement as a model, and as I say, we go through each of those, and there is a worksheet on each of those for you to take a look at with what the current state of any of those tools that you are using in your project at that moment. So you'll have a full current state of what you are doing at the moment. And there's an area about great engagement mindset, and there are activities and resources in there for you to both use and keep to develop that engagement mindset. This one, develop an appreciative stakeholder focus, is something that you can do again and again and just practice again and again to make sure that when you're viewing your stakeholders, it's from a very appreciative area. This is an area about your audiences next, and identifying who your audience types are, so whether they're government audiences, etc. And then a look at engagement processes, and this is the area about engagement planning. You can see we spend quite a bit of time in there, and there are several worksheets. There is the engagement template in there if you buy today, and all the other resources that will help you in there, including a facilitation process, as you can see, for you to run a stakeholder analysis, which again, you'll be able to use that again and again. And this is developing your engagement skills, including a self-assessment for you to go through what you feel your skills are at the moment in each of those areas, and a development plan for you to work on over the next course of 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, whatever you choose there. Be enrolled from when you pay. You'll just need to add some details in there to enroll as a student, and then you'll be able to head straight in to do those training courses. And that is what it all looks like. Well, we are out of time. Now this video will come to you as a replay, and I do look forward very much to seeing you in Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement. One of the next programs I plan to develop is what I'm calling at the moment, I'm not sure if it'll stay this title, but at the moment I'm calling it The Complete Guide to Engagement Planning, which will be a step-by-step through this engagement planning, including a workbook around helping you develop an engagement plan, and we'll go into more detail about a lot of the tools for you to choose, and particularly how to integrate that whole online and offline experience, but it will be necessary to do this course before you're able to jump into that. I do hope to see you in Introduction to Community and Stakeholder Engagement very soon. Thank you again so much for joining me today. Bye-bye.